Our friend, Mr. Dan Bonner, is back with us now here on GCR. Dan, it's Glenn and Paul. Always good to catch up with you, sir. Thank you for taking a couple of minutes for us.
Well, good morning. It's always nice to be invited.
It's great to hear from you, Dan. I was talking about this at the beginning of the show. It's difficult for me to give context to what happened yesterday because I think that you say that there's a testament to the fact that in trying circumstances, Danny Manning has led a group that has not quit, right? Like, has not simply folded and given up and packed it in because their coach was gone and they lost another assistant coach. And that means something. Does it mean he has to be the next head coach at the University of Maryland? I don't know that it means that. I mean, they still haven't won a lot of games in this time. But I do think it means something that they have remained competitive and that they were capable of winning a game like that yesterday, because I do think it's possible that in these circumstances, a lot of groups would say, we got nothing to play for, and they would just kind of fall apart as the season went on.
I think that's an accurate statement. And as much as I think Danny Manning and Matt Brady and Greg Manning and the other people on that staff have done a really nice job, I think the primary people that you have to credit for the fact that they haven't quit are the players themselves. These are obviously, for the most part, very experienced guys. A couple of them, like Fats Russell, came to Maryland for the purpose of seeing whether he could play at that level. And so, it's a circumstance that I've never heard of before. And so I'm sure those guys have never experienced before. And yes, the coaching staff has done a nice job keeping things together, but the players have been fabulous in their competitiveness and their willingness to keep going on.
And yeah, that means something, right?
Well, it does mean something, and like I say, I don't know what it means about Danny. Danny is a very good coach, a very good person. I don't know, he's got a personality that is sort of very low key. And I'm not sure that that's what the people at Maryland are looking for. I don't know that people in Maryland have any idea what they're looking for.
Right.
They're looking for somebody who wants to win the national championship every single year. So they're out of their minds. And I don't know that Danny at this stage in his life wants to deal with that. I don't know. Should Danny Manning be considered? Absolutely. But the fact that the team hasn't quit, is that enough of a recommendation? I don't know the answer to that question, but certainly I think that Danny and his coaching staff, but more importantly, his players, have done a really nice job just continuing to play, continuing to compete, continuing to fight.
Dan, you've called a lot of Maryland basketball games for a long time. You've been around this program for decades at this point. Give me an idea for you. You say, I don't know what it is that Maryland's looking for. What should Maryland be looking for in this search for a new head coach?
Well, number one, I think Maryland, and again, the staff, the administration is limited by the insanity of the Maryland fans. And when I say that, I'm not using that as a pejorative entirely. You want fans who care. Fans is short for fanatics. You want people who care. But I'm not sure that the Maryland fan base has a realistic level of expectations. But put that aside, I think what the Maryland administration should be looking for is somebody who can lead the Maryland program in the current day and age. I think they need somebody who is experienced at a high level. Somebody who has some head coaching experience, possibly, although not necessarily. Arizona is doing pretty well with a
really
guy
well.
who is a head coach, who was never a head coach, who was an assistant. Years ago, Kansas, one of the country's top programs, hired a little-known assistant coach named Roy Williams, and that didn't go too badly for them.
Nope, worked out okay.
But part of the thing that is going to be a problem for the Maryland administration is winning the press conference. And I don't think they should worry about doing that. They should get somebody who, for example, and this is a guy I don't think they'll even take a look at, but Dennis Gates, the head coach at Cleveland State, two-time Horizon League Coach of the Year.
Sure.
He's got his team. They're the number one seed in the Horizon League again this year. and that's one of those leagues where you're only getting one bid, so you have to win the tournament, the conference tournament to get to the NCAA tournament. But he has taken his teams to NCAA tournaments, and he was for a number of years the assistant coach for Florida State. And at Florida State, he helped recruit guys like Jonathan Isaac and Xavier Rattan-Mays and Dwayne Bacon and Trent Forrest and M.J. Walker. And, there's a whole string of guys who have played in the NBA. And so that's the pedigree of a person who can recruit, the pedigree of a person who can coach, the pedigree of a person who has long experience in coaching. But again, is he a flashy enough name to satisfy the Maryland fan base? But what I would say is he is exactly the kind of person that they should be looking for.
I love that. I mean, it's a name that I've heard a couple times, not necessarily in connection to Maryland, which is unfortunate. And yeah, everything about his profile suggests he's a coach very much on the rise that is capable of doing significant things in the next job. Dan Bonner is with us here on Glenn Clark Radio. Dan, what you allude to, of course, is the idea of you've got to overwhelm us, right? Like we want it to be a home run. Maryland fans think that Nate Oates should want the Maryland job, right? Nate Oates probably doesn't want the Maryland job, if I had to guess. That being said, let me throw out the names that have been discussed. The Ed Cooley in particular. Ed Cooley's name I think is perfect for this conversation. The question I keep coming back to is Maryland a good enough job for someone to leave a place where they're happy? And Ed Cooley, I think, is the perfect example of that, right? Because, my God, just look at that atmosphere in Providence, and he's beloved, and it's his alma mater, and he's this iconic figure despite the fact that he's won one NCAA tournament game during his tenure there, right? If you're somewhere where you're happy, is Maryland a good enough job for you to say, happiness be damned, I got a shot to go do something incredible there, and I got to take it?
Well, I will address that question by saying one thing, and that is happiness is the most important thing. And so if you're someplace where you're happy and you're content, then there is no job that's worth taking. And the guy who demonstrated that year after year after year before he created a job that is now one of those jobs is Mark Few.
Right.
And Mark Few, I have actually talked to him about this over the years, and happy means an awful lot. And so I think that, Ed Cooley is not a guy. I mean, he's a native of Providence. And as you say, he's beloved in Providence. And, every coach out there can look. Mark Turgeon was a popular figure among his colleagues. And the first thing anybody's going to do about the Maryland job is call up Mark. And if Mark describes his experiences, let's face it, Mark was never popular with the Maryland fans, not from the day he got hired. But these are the same fans who ran off their, Gary Williams because he wouldn't dig too deeply into that AAU cesspool. And he wasn't recruiting, even though, none of those guys on that 2002 national championship team were highly recruited guys. That wasn't the way Gary functioned. But, okay, that got passé, so we could get rid of Gary, and now we get in a guy who's supposedly a good recruiter, and he was a good recruiter, but, he wasn't winning the national championship every year, so, we don't like him. So why would Ed Cooley, in a position where he is beloved, why would he want to walk into a situation like that, even, no matter how much money they could offer him?
It's an interesting. I'm taken aback a little bit, Dan. Only more the Gary side of things, where I definitely know. I mean, I lived it. There were plenty of people that, there are insane people that exist within every fan base, right? Like that, we know that there are insane people
Absolutely.
that exist in the Duke fan base. I'm not saying there weren't some of those that existed, but I would never agree the idea that he was run off in any way. That seemed a bit, I don't know, over the top to me. Gary, of course, was 2 years removed from that great team with Graves Vasquez that, if not for Corey Lucius's shot, obviously, in the round of 32, perhaps has a chance to return to the Final Four. I don't know. That seems tough to me. I'm in a weird place where I do think the Maryland fan, they're not just going to love you for the sake of loving you, right? Like the alone being in the title of head coach is not going to make you a beloved figure, and it's one of the things I appreciate, right? I don't think that's the way that it should work within sport. Is just because you have a title, you're treated as a deity. I don't think that should be the case. You're someone that has a job, and a very high-paying job within a state, frankly, where tax dollars go to it. But is that something you think coaches would be scared of, is the fact that they don't immediately get treated as a deity just because they're the head coach somewhere? Like, obviously you know far more about this than I do. Is that the assumption that someone should have, that just being called head coach or in that title should give you the overwhelming appreciation and beloved nature within a fan base because your title is head coach?
I don't think that's the case at all, and I'm miscommunicating if you think that's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, you run off a guy who's been to 5 NCAA tournaments in the last 6 years, and it would have been 6 out of 7, except for the COVID year. And I think coaches do look at that. They don't have to be deified just because they're the head coach. But I think a lot of places, most places, 6 NCAA tournaments in 7 years. Now, as has been demonstrated time and time again, that NCAA tournament, the one and done kind of thing, it's a crazy, and even Gary, I've read some articles on him talking about the 2002 national championship team where he says, people don't understand how hard that is. I say, you just have to win 6 games. Well, right. It's very hard.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that come up. And so I think the fact that you get there is, you're there 6 times in 7 years, or 5 times in 6 years, let's be accurate. And nonetheless, you feel, for whatever reason, compelled to give up that job in December, for heaven's sake,
right.
when you have a team that's 8-4. I think that sends a danger signal to people who are looking at the job, that just what exactly is going on there.
It's interesting, right? Like I'm somewhere in between the two things, because I do think that there is an unrealistic nature of what Maryland basketball is within a percentage of the fan base. I'm flipped on this, because I've always been the Mark Turgeon thing has always been difficult for me, because I think Mark Turgeon's a good coach. I think he was a good man. I don't think in any way, at any point, was Maryland basketball embarrassing, but I do think it is the nature, like, if you're a high-level coach, do we not expect that you're going to be measured by what you do in the biggest circumstances? And, Mark Turgeon never, last year they beat UConn. It was the first time he beat a single-digit seed in the NCAA tournament ever. Does that not matter in this context? Are coaches not capable of saying, if I go there, I expect that I'm going to do better than that? I say that not trying to challenge you, Dan. I hope you know that. I'm really just asking questions out loud as we try to go through this process. Yeah.
So no, I don't feel challenged at all. I think all coaches want to be successful.
Yeah.
And I think they want to be successful at the highest level. And I think they expect to be held accountable if they're not successful. But I think that a lot of coaches would tell you, that Mark Turgeon had a degree of success. Let's take, for example, a person who now everybody would acknowledge is a heck of a coach. His team's having a tough year this year because of some injuries, but Leonard Hamilton is a perfect example.
Yep.
Leonard Hamilton is somebody who, it was a long time before he got that program really rolling. And so, was Florida State just smart? Did they not care enough about basketball? I don't know what the answer to that question is, but I think when you get to the NCAA tournament 5 times in 6 years, that should count for something. And if your administration or your fan base or whoever is not satisfied with that, all I'm saying is that if I'm somebody who is in a situation, and the name Andy Enfield has been thrown around,
100%, right.
Or Nate Oates or any of these other people who we're talking about, if I'm in a situation where I'm comfortable, then why would I take a job where I know that if I go to the NCAA tournament 5 times in 6 years, that the people, possibly the administration, possibly the fan base, are going to be unhappy with my performance? That's my point here.
Sure.
I'm not criticizing
right.
The Maryland fan base. I think they're a great fan base. Again, you have that's what you want. You want people who care, and you want people who care deeply. You don't want apathy. And so I'm okay with that. But what I'm telling you is, if the Maryland fan base or the Maryland administration is looking for this home run hire, then I'm not sure they're going to get it, because if I'm a coach and I'm in a comfortable situation,
right?
Why would I go to a place where if I go to the NCAA tournament 5 times in 6 years, people are going to be unhappy? I guess that's the point I'm making.
Well, and I do think it leads in. I promise I'm going to let you go here in a minute, Dan. I really appreciate you taking the time for us this morning.
Glad to do it.
I'll follow it up with, what is Maryland basketball, right? And I do think this is the relevant question that comes from all of this, right? It ties it all together. Is this a program 20 years removed from even sniffing a Final Four, right? Like, it's not even like they've been close. In 20 years removed, and of course they celebrated it yesterday while you guys were there. Is Maryland still that type of program? Like, is it still a place where you can go and believe you're winning national championships if you're the next head coach at Maryland?
I think if you're the coach in the Big Ten, if you take a job at a Big Ten school, or you take a job at an ACC school or an SEC school, or whatever, any of the big conferences, then you have to look at the possibility, at least the possibility, that you can be capable of winning a national championship. I think that's why you go to a place like that. That's why you give up a job, maybe at a smaller school, a mid-major or a low-major, where you've had tremendous success, because you want that challenge. So certainly I think that Maryland is a place where that ought to be one of your goals. But your question is, what is Maryland basketball? And that is where you get into a very interesting question. I read where Damian Evans, the AD, said that Maryland is a top 20 program. And my question would be, is it?
Right.
Is it? And my answer would be, well, no. They're a program that, every now and again, and sometimes maybe on a frequent basis, has a top 20 team. But are they a top 20 program? I don't know. Can it be a top 20 program? Well, yes, but is it? I don't think it is. And then the other thing is, everybody says, well, you ought to be successful at Maryland because you have the D.C. area where you can recruit.
Right.
Well, yeah, you do, but everybody else is recruiting in the D.C. area. And it's not like it was at one time where people are all fired up about going to school close to home. If you look around the country, the guys who stay at home are rare. The kid from Ohio State, Liddell.
Yep.
One of the big stories leading into the Maryland game was the treatment he got from the fans at Illinois, because here's an Illinois kid who elected not to go to Illinois. And I would submit to you that that's more common now than uncommon. The kid, the Branham kid from Ohio State, it's a big deal that he's from Columbus and he went to Ohio State. It's a big deal that the Blake Wesley kid from Notre Dame is a South Bend kid and he went to Notre Dame. It's rare. Just because you live or your school is in a potentially fertile recruiting area doesn't mean that you are ipso facto going to get all those recruits. It just doesn't happen anymore that way.
100%. 100%. All right, Dan, I promise this is it. I'll let you go. Hey, who's good? Who can actually – the top 6 teams in the country all lost over the weekend, right? Like, who's good? And does any of this open things up that maybe Towson could win the national championship somehow this year?
No. Towson's not going to win the national championship.
They're a hell of a story, though, Dan. I'm telling you. Watch out. They get in. They're really good, man. They could be a threat. They're a top 60 KenPom team. Like, they could be a threat. But who's legitimately good? Is it as insane as maybe if somebody's just parachuting in and watching college basketball this weekend, seeing all the top teams go down? Is it the story that it's because this is the most parity and there could be 30 teams that could win the title this year? Or is it really just sort of one bizarre weekend where a bunch of good teams lost and it's still likely to be one of those good teams who ends up winning the title?
Well, I think it's going to be one of those good teams who ends up winning the title, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a lot of fun talking about it. I think that there are probably 20 teams out there that could do it. Let's, for example, take a team like a Tennessee. Tennessee is a team. They've had some big wins. They've been blown out a couple of times, but they're a team that can grind it out, and I think you have to be able to grind it out in the NCAA tournament. So I think a team like that is certainly they wouldn't be on the top of anybody's list, but they're certainly capable. And I think there's a number of teams out there like that. And so I think it is going to be a fabulous NCAA tournament. I think it's going to be really fun because it's one of those years where we're not going in and saying, oh, it's either going to be Duke or Gonzaga.
Right.
That's not what we have. And so I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be one of those great years.
He is Dan Bonner. Dan, what's your schedule like this week?
Well, I've got Georgia Tech and Clemson on Wednesday, and then on Sunday I have the Missouri Valley Championship game. I'm
Arch
really
Madness.
anxious to get out there and see them. I go out there every year at this time to do that tournament, Kevin Harlan and I, and it's a lot of fun. And, there's some pretty, Loyola Chicago, who a lot of people have either on the bubble or in the tournament. They're the fourth place team in that league. So I'm looking forward to that tournament as well.
It's what an atmosphere that is. They got something special brewing out there. Dan Bonner, really appreciate it. A really enthralling conversation. Thank you for taking the time for us as always. Hopefully we can chat again as we get into the tournament, sir.
Okay. All right. Thanks.